I'd like to call this meeting to order. Council, welcome. Welcome our guests. At this time, I'd like to turn the opening over to Councillor Bill Hiebert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the last 3 months, news is mainly dominated by COVID-19 coronavirus and its effect on the whole world, which has changed our lives in a great extent. Even though in the US alone they lost over 100,000 lives to the virus, and almost every other country in the world is still reeling from its effects. On May 25th, in the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota, a police officer arrested 46-year-old George Floyd for supposedly passing a counterfeit bill to a cashier. This arrest and its results caught on private video recording that went public almost immediately changed everything in the news, from COVID-19 to police violence towards a black man. I was very disturbed by watching this injustice towards Mr. Floyd as he lay there under the brutal assault of this policeman. I said to my wife as we watched the news that day, this will create a large protest and an outcry for Black Lives Matter, and well-justified protest for racial reform around the world of today. And in the 3.5 weeks since, we have seen millions of people around the world protesting in different cities for Black lives, for Black people and other minorities as well. Unfortunately, all too often, it brings out the worst in some individuals, resulting in anarchy and looting, which spoils the motive. Segue to who we are in Steinbach and where we come from. It's 1874, 20 farm families from German descent from Russian colonies moved to a place called Steinbach, where we live today. One culture, one language, German. Our city was progressive, growing rapidly in population and commerce. Over the years, other ethnic groups have joined us. In particular, in the late 70s, we welcomed a fairly large group of refugees from Laos, Vietnam, war-torn regions. By 2020, Steinbach has well over 55 ethnic groups represented. Talking to Michelle Bazzini today, I was talking at Southeast Immigration Services. She gave me that number, and we had 55 flags in the parade last year. This brings strength to our community, and hopefully we learn from each other. Bringing me to the topic of racism, which we need to be aware of and address in our own thinking. I've had to change my attitude over the years, even though I would not have thought of myself as being racist in any way. So for that, I want to apologize publicly and say sorry. I want to encourage all of us to accept all people as equals, no matter what color. Religious text says, don't just pretend to love others, really love them. Hate what is wrong, hold tightly to what is good. In my closing, I want to emphasize that we have a great police force here in Steinbach that believes in racial equality, and they do their best in delivering fair treatment to all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hiebert. Council, we have the agenda in front of us, and just before we adopt it, I would like to add under other business, I have a letter that I'd like to review at that time. So if we could just write that in, and then I'm looking for a motion to approve. Councillor Penner, second by Councillor Siemens. Any comments?
No comments.
We'll call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Council, we have the minutes of June 2nd, 2020, the regular council meeting. They start on page 1. We've all had the chance to review. I'm looking for a motion to approve. Councillor Hiebert, second by Councillor Hiebert. Any comments? None. Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Okay. Seeing none, we are just before 7:35, so we'll go to 9A, accounts payable in the back of the book. We've all had opportunity to review this too. Looking for a motion to approve. Councillor Penner, second by Councillor Siemens. Any comments?
No comments.
Okay. Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. We'll just take 9B right away too. These are the financial statements ending May 31st, 2020. They're also in the back of the book. Looking for a motion to approve. Councillor Hiebert, second by Councillor Hiebert. Any comments? So we'll call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Okay, it is now 7:35. We will go back to number 6, public hearing. This is bylaw 2148, re-78 First Street. Starts on page 4 of your package. At this time, we will close the council hearing, open the public meeting, and Mr. Workney, could you please introduce this file?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of council, this is bylaw 2148, which is an application for rezoning on a civic property with a civic address of 78 First Street. The owners of the property are VP Enterprises, Inc., and the applicant of the rezoning is Edwin Pankratz. Purpose of the application is to rezone the subject property from RLD, residential low density, to RMD, residential medium density. And the applicant is proposing to rezone the property and consolidate it with the neighboring property at 70 First Street and add an additional multifamily building on the site. Notices, as are required under the Planning Act, have been issued. There is one piece of written correspondence on the file, which you have in your agenda package. With respect to this application, seeking the rezoning, it is to allow the development of a 10-unit multifamily structure. The subject parcel is designated as residential policy area in the city's official community plan. Recommendation from administration is to give rezoning bylaw 2148 second reading, subject to the execution of a development agreement, and provided that requirements of the Planning Act pertaining to objections to this file have been met, third reading may also be given. I also want to point out comments were received from Community Planning Branch. The letter notes that if council is of the opinion that the proposed rezoning is consistent with the intents and policies of the official community plan, community planning would not object to the approval of this bylaw. And no comments were provided by any other provincial agency.
Thank you, Mr. Workentine. Is the applicant here today? Would you wish to speak to council? Okay, take the podium, state your name and address, please.
My name is Edwin Pankratz, currently residing at 36 Carrier Drive in Lebrokery. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to present our proposal to you tonight. As stated already, we would like to apply for an approval to rezone 78 First Street to residential medium density and to combine the property of 78 First Street with 70 First Street, which is already zoned as a residential medium density. And the plan would be to build a copy of the same building as is now on 71st Street on 78 First Street. I would like to start off with just sharing a few reflections on the apartment at 71st Street, which we built in the last 7 months. This is the first time we managed a project of this scale with our company. And starting in November, we were nervous and a bit worried on how things would turn out, but looking back now, I don't think it could have been any better. And we quickly realized that we had great neighbors on First Street, especially the one right beside 71st Street. He was very accommodating and encouraging, but also all the other residents, we didn't have a single complaint during the construction phase, and I'm sure there was enough reason to complain, be it noise level or extra traffic and so on. And we would like to thank our neighbors for that. It was also great to work together with the team here at the City of Steinbach, be it the planning, engineering, or especially the inspectors. They made us sure feel like we're working together on this project, and it meant a lot for us, especially the first time going through this. And that was instrumental in helping us meet our occupancy date, which was yesterday. So we had people starting to move in yesterday, probably today as we speak. And also encouraged us to continue to develop in the area, and that's why we're here today, to get 78 First Street rezoned. And I would like to share a couple of reasons why we think that rezoning 78 First Street is a good plan. First of all, there's definitely a need for more apartment-style rentals in that area. And the most recent evidence is the one we built on 71st Street. Before occupancy, we had 10 lease agreements signed, with them all moving in within half a month. And we actually had to turn people away because it was full already. We think we can help to fill this demand with continuing to develop on that street. First Street is also a perfect location for rental units. It's in the center of many amenities, and we have several renters who are now able to even walk to their workplace, which is very convenient for people living in an apartment. We work closely with city planning on the idea of combining both properties, 70 and 78 First Street, to one, to ensure that we meet all the requirements of residential medium density zoning, and we would not need additional variances approved. I would like to talk a little bit about the style of the building. As you can see on the picture, this is a 3D rendering of what it could look like potentially. So the building on the right is up, standing. The building is designed in such a way to fit best as possible into the neighborhood. And we try to especially take the privacy issue into consideration in the design. So it's a 3-story in the front, and it's actually sloping down to a 2-story in the back, which allowed us for a very gentle roof slope, which brought the whole building down. And the total height of the building still meets the requirement of a low-density multifamily, which is what a lot of the other apartments on that street are zoned as. Also, we tried to limit the numbers of windows facing the neighboring properties from the suites. We have 7 now on each side, of which are 2 transom windows, which are fairly high. You need to be at least my size to look out. And no main living room window or master bedroom window is facing the neighboring properties. The building would be accessed via one driveway with parking stalls off to the side, and that allows all parking and backing out of parking stalls to be on the property and not onto the street, just to limit the effect that it would have on traffic on that street. The house that is currently on 78 First Street is quite old, and it's in need of some major foundation repairs, which are not really viable and almost impossible to do, so we would like to move that building out of the area. We also wanted to hear what our neighbors have to say to this, and we reached out to them. Unfortunately, due to the health situation, we sent out a letter to most of them, and we encouraged them to contact us with any concerns or potential issues they have with the development. We did receive one call, and the resident had mainly 2 concerns. One was that he thought that the buildings just don't fit into the neighborhood. And partially I agree with that. Obviously, a multifamily building looks quite different than a single family house. And that's why we did spend a lot of time on the exterior design. We tried to design it in such a way that it's not going to devalue the properties. We considered many different options, and we felt like the one we have is going to look good in the neighborhood, even though it's a more costly alternative. The second concern the resident had was he was concerned about too much traffic on the street. And again, that's something that I do not want to deny, that a 10-apartment building will create more traffic on the street than a single-family house. And by no means am I a traffic expert, but from working through this with the planning department here in the city, there seemed to be no immediate concern. We did talk directly to the neighbors beside the property, and the one beside 71st Street is very supportive and encouraging. He thinks it's a good idea to have this kind of development on First Street. We also talked to the fellow renting right beside 78 First Street. He also didn't have any concerns and just asked if at all possible to keep the trees on the property line. And we want to consider that as much as we can. So again, for these reasons, we would like to propose to rezone 78 First Street to residential medium density and combine the property with 71st Street. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just ask you to stay at the podium. Councillor, are there any questions for the developer? Okay, then you can take a seat. Okay. Is there anyone here with questions or wanting to object to this file? Okay. Okay, I'll ask you, you have questions?
Yes,
on
actually, I
this
have concerns, Earl.
Okay, then I will ask you to come to the podium, state your name and address, and you can go ahead.
Okay, my name is Frank. And my wife, Brandy, she's at home. I live at 61 Cloverdale Street. My biggest concern is traffic flow. Every single morning between like 7 and 8 o'clock, you see a massive lineup trying to get into Tim Hortons on the SO and the 52, and there's always a long line, and occasionally it clears.
Excuse me just for a second. We're talking about First Street.
Yes,
That
but
would be Giesbrecht. So we're talking about the traffic on First Street. This development's on First Street?
Yes.
We're talking about the traffic on First Street only,
Okay,
okay? That's Giesbrecht and 52. That's something different. If you can, you have to, we have to stay on target here,
okay.
and we're talking about First Street.
With
Go ahead.
First Street, with all those other multi-unit apartment buildings that are coming up right now, which is really great, it brings in new residential housing, but we don't actually have those fully rented out yet or bought, and so we really don't know what the traffic flow will be on First Street yet, or that kind of people that will be looking to buy there as well. With building this, with rezoning it and building a 10-unit apartment building, which is really great for Steinbach, but we already have one right beside, and if we keep building on there, eventually it's going to become our rental property area, and it's going to get very congested on First and along 7-Eleven as well to get out. So those are my concerns. And there's also this really nice soccer hidden park actually behind that property. And as more people rent those properties, it's going to be essentially maybe a concern for parents to like go to the nearest park, which is right there. And I know that not a lot of people know the treasure of Steinbach is right there, so they're going to have to be more conscientious of letting their kids wander there by themselves.
Okay, so you have a concern about safety.
Safety at the park.
Okay. Okay, so these are your,
These are my
these
concerns.
are, okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Guess we'll just wait for her to bring them in. State your name and your address.
My name is Ian, and I live on 68 Westdale Street. All right, first off, really neat to see expansion and growth in Steinbach and you've seen there was some derelict houses on First Street that definitely need to be dealt with. That's really neat to see. My biggest concern is how fast we're moving on all these developments, because we have that condominium on the north side of First Street that has gone in, and it's still, there's only one actually being occupied right now. There's a second one that's going to be probably in the next month or so, and there's two more that still have to be built, if I'm correct on that. And then in the fourplex on the south side, and then your apartment building, which very nice, I like it. But just the rate that we're expanding, we can't see what that result is on First Street, and exiting and entering on First Street from the only other two streets, Giesbrecht or Highway 12, can sometimes be very congested. So that's my concern, that we are kind of rushing in on this without seeing what we're up against.
Is this a concern or an objection?
Objection of that,
It is an objection, okay.
yes.
Okay. That's everything?
That's, yeah, that's for me, that's everything.
Okay.
Thank you.
State your name and your address, please.
Carolyn Somerville. I live 146 First Street.
146 First Street.
Yes.
Okay. And you have questions or objections?
I have concerns.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if few of you know who my husband is, Chris Somerville. He works with very vulnerable people, and there are a lot of vulnerable people in Steinbach, whether people like to admit it or not. And vulnerable people cannot afford high-rise housing. They can't afford the cost of $1,000 rent. And I know that some of these ones that have just been built are, I've checked on it, and they're $1,000 a month rent. There's not a lot of housing that can be affordable for people who can't afford that kind of rent. And I think that if these houses are going to be built, they need to be addressed to that situation where people who don't have a lot of income, and there are a lot of people in Steinbach who can't afford that. I mean, we can't afford that. I mean, and my husband has a decent job, but there are a lot of people who don't have that. And so therefore, when they say, well, these are low-income housing, that's not true. Because there are a lot of apartments in Winnipeg that are less than $1,000 a month. And when people charge $1,000 a month for a rent in places like on First Street, it's not aiding and helping people in Steinbach be able to rent affordable housing. And I think that the other thing too that I think that I object about all of these condos and all the apartments that are being built is that it's totally changing First Street, and we've lived there for 27 years. And I know I agree with the man that was here just previously that there were some houses that were not in very good shape. But I think instead of building all these condos and apartments, I think that possibly a number of side-by-sides could have been built and rented for less than $1,000 a month, so that people who need housing that's less could have afforded that, and then we could have also kept this First Street looking more like residential area instead of all apartments. And I don't like it that it's changed. I know that people say, well, that's just progress. Well, what's their definition of progress? And so anyway, my objections are that the cost is too much, it's changing the look of the street. And also, I agree with the first man that came in, that from First Street, these people that are coming down First Street, which flows right into Giesbrecht and right on the corner there to get into the highway, which is still part of, because it flows like a river. It's so backed up you can't even get out in the morning time. And so that, because of all these apartments, it's going to be almost even more impossible to get out at a certain time in the morning time. People are going to have to go, they're going to have to go back First Street up to Main Street, and then they're going to have to go around and then down. And that's even going to cause more congestion too. So anyway, that's what I think.
Okay, thank you for your comments, but we, I mean, the incidental traffic, that'll be on other streets.
Oh,
That will be there,
well-
but we do have to focus on, we have to look at this street, and we have to look at this project.
Yep.
And if we start looking at Giesbrecht, even if we look at 52, if we start looking at
No.
even to Lund, we can't do that, because those streets have nothing to do with this development.
Yeah.
So that's
well,
why we can appreciate where you're coming from, and I get that. But we have to make our decision on First Street.
I avoid going that way. I go through the mill parking lot. I don't even use that corner anymore.
Well, thank you.
Yep.
Yes, come take the podium and please state your name and your address, please.
I'm Leah Reimer, 138 First Street.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I have lived there now for 66 years. And right now, I would not like to sell at this point. And I appreciate my neighborhood. And I don't see that I would be comfortable with something going up. I don't know how close it would be. I don't know how far down the street this is, that they're proposing, how far down the street they want to build.
Well, this is
First Street,
78.
how far between the highway and Donald Street or further?
Yeah, it's between the highway and Donald Street. It's after Donald Street from your place.
Between highway and Donald Street?
Yeah.
And that's where I live.
Yeah.
I
No.
I really,
You're after Donald. Oh, I was saying, oh no, Giesbrecht, between Giesbrecht and Donald Street.
oh, it's between Giesbrecht and
Yeah,
Donald.
I'm sorry, I got it
Not
wrong.
between Donald and the highway.
Right.
I mean, like,
You're between Donald and the highway.
Yeah.
This is between.
map up there.
Yeah, sorry. This is
I'm
between
across from
Giesbrecht.
7-Eleven.
Yeah. There, if you see there's Donald, they're a
Yeah,
couple lots in.
yeah. And this is proposed further, past Donald.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, all right. I'm not right next to it, so I guess, what should I say?
So do you have an objection to it?
Pardon?
Are you objecting to it at this point?
Well, if you have to put down that I'm objecting to it, I might say yes. I might say yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Well, should we just wait till you'll just keep getting them? We're done, okay. So is there anyone else wanting to have questions or object to this file? I'll ask one more time. Is there anyone else wanting to object or have questions to this file? Okay, seeing no more, Ed, Mr. Pankratz, you were making some notes as they had objections. I'm just wondering if you would want to rebuttal to some of those objections.
The concern about traffic, like I mentioned before, is not something I can really speak to. I'm not an expert in that. The suggestion of maybe putting down side-by-sides instead of apartments for less than $1,000, I think from a business perspective is not really viable. And also in regards to the park, it is definitely a gem in Steinbach, I agree. I have, during the phase of construction there, probably could count on my hand how many times I've seen people in that park. So I feel even with a couple of apartments on that street, it's for sure not going to be overpopulated from my perspective.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Council, were there any questions for the applicant at this time? Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Penner.
Question to administration, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Is there any recent traffic studies that have been conducted with regards to First Street and/or Giesbrecht and 52?
Not a traffic study per se. However, the city does conduct an annual traffic count program that does occur every fall. In the 2019 report that was presented to council earlier this year, there was a traffic count that was completed for the Giesbrecht and PTH 52 West intersection.
Follow up, if I may?
Yeah, go.
With regards to other neighborhoods that have an access point onto either PTH 12 or 52, are those traffic levels comparable to other neighborhoods? Or is it is there a severe known spike on that intersection?
I can speak generally. Not all intersections or municipal streets that intersect with either PTH 52 or PTH 12 are counted every year. The list is generally limited to what the administration considers to be more strategic or intersections that are related to business activity or commercial activity. Nevertheless, there are some streets that do service generally residential areas that do get counted. The one in question that is probably closest to the intersection in particular would have been the Lund Road and PTH 52 West intersection. Based on the traffic count information, the through traffic and also the turning traffic either onto those streets or from them to the highway were comparable.
Thank you.
Anything further? Well, I have a question of administration. Mr. Wargentine, in your best knowledge or opinion, in areas where we've approved multifamily dwellings infill, according to First Street, when you look at how many units will be there when it's all full, how does that compare to places where we have approved other, as far as unit-wise, like how does that, like numbers of units, how does that compare to where we've already approved RMD?
Well, just to give you a comparison, as of now, considering that the application for this file is not yet approved, City Council has approved a total of 82 multifamily units in the First Street neighborhood over the last couple of years. Comparing to other areas of Steinbach where multifamily units have been developed within existing residential neighborhoods, there are neighborhoods that are quite similar with the number of multifamily units, and to my knowledge, there are other neighborhoods that could have upwards of 180 multifamily units within a geographic area that's similar to the size of First Street.
So up to double the amount of units as were approved at this point on First Street.
That's right. There are a variety of different configurations throughout Steinbach, but there are neighborhoods that would have that many residential units as far as a multifamily type of development.
To the best of your knowledge, with the traffic counts that we do, how are those roads handling that volume of traffic?
That would be difficult as I don't have the counts and I don't have the information to make a comparison based on actual counts. But I'm not aware that there is any concerns with traffic loading in those other neighborhoods.
Okay, so there's no complaints of traffic loading at this point in other neighborhoods where we've approved multifamily?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Okay, council, we will close the public hearing, open the council meeting. Council, how would you like to proceed? Councillor Swagstra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make the motion for second reading.
Okay, thank you. And second by Councillor Siemens. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that we have a good proposal that's been put before us in terms of the request to rezone 78 First Street to medium density. This is obviously would be a very similar development to what has already happened at the neighboring property at 71st Street, and so both of them would have 10 units. I think the applicants have done their due diligence in terms of consulting with the neighborhood. They presented a good plan here. As far as some of the questions and concerns that were raised, I agree with the statements that have been made already that this should not have a major impact on traffic. Again, there's always going to be through traffic as an issue, but we're talking about an additional 9 or 10 vehicles per day in terms of the increase, and so that is not, as far as traffic numbers go, that's actually pretty small. As far as the issue of pricing and all that, that's completely out of our purview here. Obviously, you have to set whatever the rates are in terms of market rate, and frankly, usually we hear complaints that the apartments that are being built aren't high-end enough. And so now we have a developer coming and presenting higher-end quality apartments. And of course, you have to rent them out at a higher amount because you have to be able to make money from that. So I think on the whole that we have a good project here and that we should move ahead with it.
Councillor Siemens, anything further?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with this project. I have some concerns with some of the areas not related to the project in itself, but we are seeing throughout some of our older areas of Steinbach repurposing those lots, and that's what's happening here too. We heard that there's derelict housing and the condition of the homes, so this area too is under revitalization. And so City Council has agreed to put a multifamily homes on the north side or on First Street, and that's indicated in our community plan. And our community plan discussions taking place every 5 years, and we update that plan, and during those discussions we added a number of iterations ago, we added a central business district which borders on the backside of Home Street North. And so we agreed that at that time, and I remember the discussion, that's why I bring it as a point here, is I remember that discussion that we had the central business district, which is commercial, then we had multifamily on First Street, and then the south side would be, that would be the buffer to the single family homes on the south side. So City Council set a precedent on the south side of First Street by allowing multifamily homes. I agree with this project because there's a lot of people in Steinbach, or there's not a lot of people, there's a lot of properties in Steinbach that over the next 10 to 20 years are going to be revitalized in our older parts of the city. And what are we going to do with those large lots? Single family homes on those large lots isn't what people are looking for, as fewer people want to rebuild on those old lots because they're long and they're narrow. And I think our community plan on the south side of the street was low density housing. Now we've changed that as a council, one lot at a time at this point. Now the one difference was that the single lot on 71st Street on the south side was medium density, which was grandfathered into our zoning bylaw. And so I agree with this project from the standpoint of that it fits that neighborhood. That neighborhood is in revitalization at this point. I like the plan as it's laid forward. I do also have traffic concerns all over the community, including there, which is something that we have to work at on an ongoing basis. But I think the bottom line here for me is a concern that it doesn't set the priorities that we set out on our community plan. And the plan is a tool, and it's used by city staffs, city council, and those looking to develop or buy in the different areas. And so I think as a council, we need to make relooking First Street as a priority when we look at a rezoning plan.
Thank you. Is there anything further of council? Anything in closing? No. Okay. Council, I too will support the motion. I just want to thank the developer for a great presentation. I want to thank everyone from the neighborhood that came out and shared their concerns with us. But one thing, council, that we can't overlook is it's very expensive to develop. It's very expensive to develop these older lots, as Councillor Siemens said, these lots that need to be revitalized. Very, very costly. And a side-by-side or a single-family dwelling just doesn't pay the bills. Plus, I think our developer here has showed us today that there is market for single-family, or I mean for multifamily. There's market for these homes because they were full before they were completed. And I think it's a really great thing for the area. I think they've gone the extra mile and they've made something of quality and something that will last and something that will bring equity to the neighborhood. And for that reason, I support that. So I'll call for the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Mr. Workendine, are we good to go for third reading, or
Yes, there were 4 objections to this file, and if council considers the email that was in the package as an objection, that would be 5, but that is not sufficient to warrant a municipal board hearing. If council chooses, it may give this bylaw 3rd reading subject to the development agreement.
Okay, we will go directly into 3rd reading. Motion to approve. Councillor Hiebert, second by Councillor Penner. Go ahead, Councillor Hiebert.
I agree with what's been said thus far. This area is a transition zone. The proposal here fits well into that area, and I can't see why the city would object to going forward with it.
Anything further, Councillor Penner? Anything further, council? Anything in closing?
No, thank you.
Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, council, we will move on to number 9C. This is the building permits. They were on page 20.
Motion to approve.
Do we have seconder? Councillor Penner, any comments?
Sure.
Anything further? Anything of council? Anything in closing? Call for the question. All those in favor? It's carried. Okay, number 9D, the 2020 PSAB budget, starts on page 22. Mr. Worthington, would you please introduce this file?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. In addition to the annual financial plan that the city prepares and council approves each year, there is also a conversion to public sector accounting board standards with respect to the budget, where the numbers are restated in accordance with specific reporting standards that are necessary. The budget is shown on page 24 of your agenda package. Recommendation is that City Council adopt this PSAB-based budget for 2020.
Okay. Council, would you like to proceed? Councillor Swagstra?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hiebert? Go ahead, Councillor Swagstra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is something that we do every year, and this basically takes the budget from the form that we use on our day-to-day basis and puts it into a public sector accounting format that is the same across municipalities, and it includes the city assets. And so that's why the numbers look so different there. And but this is something we do every year because we're required to do it, and that way cities it's easier to compare where we're at.
Anything further?
I concur with Councillor Swagstra, and no more comments.
Okay. Anything of council? Anything further? Call for the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Council question period. Is there any questions of council?
Through you to administration.
Go ahead.
Is there air conditioning work in this building?
In every other room, it was working fine all day. A little warm in here.
Are you saying there's too much hot air in this room?
No comment.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to number 11A, correspondence and petitions, arm of Lac Du Bonnet, the 2020 Eastern District Golf Tournament. That starts on page 25. Council, how would you like to proceed? Take it as information? Okay. That brings us to other business. Council, I have a letter here that that we wrote and sent to the Premier of Manitoba, and it's giving feedback on the Phase 3 announcement. It was sent yesterday both by mail and by email, and I'm sure they've got it by now and they're looking at it. But I just want to read it to you, and after that, I want to open the floor for comments. So if you have some ready, that's great. If you want to make some, go right ahead. But I'll just read the letter. On behalf of Steinbach City Council, dear Premier Palliser, on behalf of Steinbach City Council, I would like to commend you for moving our province closer to a full reopening of the provincial economy. In particular, we appreciate that Phase 3 of your Restoring Safe Services Plan significantly raises the indoor and outdoor public gathering limits and also loosens restrictions on retail business and restaurants. We strongly recommend that you move forward with this aspect of your draft plan and that you loosen these restrictions even further at the earliest opportunity. However, we have serious concerns about the draft plan proposed regulations for faith-based gatherings. Phase 3 states that churches and other faith-based gatherings will be allowed to operate at 30% of the site capacity to a maximum of 300 people, provided that members can be physically separated into groups of 50 or less. However, most church buildings are not designed to separate people this way. The unfortunate reality is that if these restrictions remain in place, it will still be nearly impossible for most churches and other faith-based institutions to hold regular services. We would like to point out that the province of Alberta recently announced that churches will be able to open to full capacity as of June 12th. No doubt they are following the public health advice as well. If it is safe to attend church in Alberta, it should be safe in Manitoba as well. As the mayor of the third largest city in Manitoba, I want to stress that all churches and other faith-based institutions play a vital role in promoting community health and public well-being. Not only do faith-based institutions provide many social services that would otherwise need to be provided by the government, religious gatherings are integral to the mental and physical health of Manitobans. Thus, we strongly urge you to allow churches and other faith-based institutions to reopen to full capacity at the earliest opportunity. Sincerely, Earl Funk, Mayor Earl Funk, City of Steinbach. I would also like to add that it's my desire to see Manitoba open up fully as soon as possible. I think it's time. I think the data supports it. I think our numbers have shown it. And I think it's time now that we start opening fully and have our freedoms restored. But council, is there anyone else would like to chime in and give their response? Councillor Penner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I cannot agree more with what you penned to the Premier. We were advised to prepare ourselves for a spike in cases when Phase 2 came into effect on May 22nd. The massive spike we saw since reopening services just enough to pretend we were almost getting our economy back on track, an astonishing 12 new cases. They missed the mark on that one. Restaurants have been blessed by the province to be able to increase their capacity to 75% of normal capacity in the proposed Phase 3. How kind of the province to allow private businesses to be given just a slightest chance at actually being able to turn a profit. But wait, we still need to have our tables 6 feet apart and have our patrons separated by 6 feet apart. So it was a kind gesture, but that still only allows a restaurant to have 50% capacity. They sure missed the mark on that one too. Large public gatherings have been banned since COVID first reared its social, economic, and mental health destroying face. In the last 2 weeks, we have had multiple gatherings in the forms of marches, protests, and gatherings. The huge spike that came from tens of thousands of people gathering across the province, 6 whole cases. But wait, 5 of which were related to travel or household contact. Let's give the government the benefit of the doubt here and say that all the other cases in the last 2 weeks were directly from mass gatherings of individuals. My math isn't always great, but I'm pretty sure that still leaves us with 1 community-transmitted case. Still can't find that target with the arrow, and they missed the mark again. So last week on social media, we as a business put a post up expressing our disappointment with the provincial and federal government in their messaging and a willingness to allow individuals to have their personal freedoms back. It was viewed by nearly 10,000 individuals, shared hundreds of times, and had overwhelming support. I'm now getting stopped by nearly everyone and anyone that knows me in the community saying how much they agree with what we had to say. The people are speaking, and it's time for the province to listen. We around this table are. Why isn't Broadway? Every time the government has made a projection of new cases and how badly we need to continue to protect ourselves, they are out in left field. Even a weatherman would scoff at their ability to predict the future. Did social distancing play a crucial role in curbing the spread of this virus early on? It absolutely helped. However, it is now time that the province stops trying to save face about how incorrect they were in the duration and severity of these phases and get our province opened up again before more businesses close permanently, people die from their canceled and postponed life-saving surgeries, and we lose more young lives to suicide. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anything further? Councillor Penner?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. When COVID-19 government restrictions started, government leaders assured us that they were making decisions objectively based on rapidly changing scientific data and for our own safety. The goal was to slow the spread of COVID so that hospitals would not become overcrowded. Fast forward 2 months, and it seems that decisions are no longer being made based on data but are arbitrary, and that the goal has changed from flattening the curve to eliminating the curve. If Manitoba can't open up with 5 active cases, as of today, will we ever be able to open up again? This is exactly what so many people were concerned about at the beginning. Restrictions extending beyond what is reasonably justifiable and hampering our freedoms. And we are past what is reasonably justifiable. I've said it before, and I will say it again. If governments are allowed to impose indefinite and disproportionate restrictions in the name of stopping COVID-19, the restrictions will do more damage than the virus, and that is exactly what is happening. The economic, social, mental, and physical toll of restrictions have been staggering. It is time to recognize that those negative impacts also have a cost. The bottom line is that it is time to lift restrictions. For those businesses and people that believe it is too soon, they are free to remain closed or self-protect, but at least they would have the freedom to make a choice, unlike those that want to be fully open but aren't permitted to, unlike those who are comfortable being within 6 feet of each other but aren't allowed to be, unlike those who want to worship with fellow believers but are prevented from doing so. Manitobans should have the freedom to decide for themselves. It should be business as usual, worship as usual, and school as usual. It's time to open up. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Swaster?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few comments here. I think that one of the challenges that we've seen during this pandemic is that you have all these different levels of government and different governments, making pronouncements and statements and all that. And I want to stay here very clearly that this is where municipalities can play an important role, because we obviously do hear feedback from people, we do hear concerns, and I want our voice to be on the side of saying that we want our provincial economy to reopen. That is what our voice as a city should be, and I believe that is what we should advocate. And in too many parts of the country, including here in Manitoba, you have municipalities and municipal leaders that seem to be in a race to see who can shut down the most stuff the fastest, that are going far beyond, even what the provincial government, the guidelines that have been put forth. And so I would say here that I fully agree with the letter, and particularly just pointing out that while obviously there are some aspects of Phase 3 that do not go as far as I would like, and again, that is a draft plan, so hopefully there will be some revisions to it when it gets announced later this week based on feedback. There were revisions towards a greater opening up that were put into Phase 2 between the draft and the final version coming out. So I do want to point out a couple positive things in the proposed draft that I do think are very good. And the main thing is that retail businesses under the draft plan, and hopefully the final plan, will no longer be subjected to the 50% limit to the number of patrons in. If the province actually goes ahead with that, then that means we can stop the lineups outside all the stores. Because retail businesses will now be able to, they'll still be obviously encouraging physical distancing, but they will not be capped at a specific number where they're having to monitor every single person coming in, because that's the reason you have the lineups and you have only the single entrance. And so that is a very positive step forward if that moves ahead. So I want to be clear that that is a good step forward, and I hope that that goes ahead. And as far as the issue of churches and other faith-based gatherings, there is a concern here. Having 30% capacity, but also capping it at 300 people, whichever is lower, Obviously, that creates a challenge for any church that happens to be larger, and there are plenty of churches that have that have larger numbers, not just in this area but elsewhere, that are would be severely restricted under this. But even for smaller churches too, you've got some challenges, because under these proposed rules, even if you can have, the 30% capacity, you have to physically separate into groups of 50 or less. That's easier said than done. Churches aren't really set up the way other faith-based gatherings aren't set up that way. This is to have artificial groups of 50 in separate areas. I agree with the province of Alberta on this, that they are allowing churches to reopen to full capacity. Obviously, yes, they're still encouraging distancing, but they're not putting an arbitrary cap on that. So in terms of something that, I want us as a council to be advocating for churches and our faith-based institutions. And that's a voice that I don't hear a lot from, I don't hear it at all from other municipal leaders. I've heard nothing on that in terms of stating publicly. So I think it's very important that we go on the record publicly saying that we support our churches and we recognize the important role that they play within our city, and that we need to have rules that are more flexible than what's being proposed here. So I really do hope that as far as changes that come in phase 3, I hope there's some more flexibility as far as some of the businesses. I would agree there, and I certainly agree we need more flexibility in regards to churches and faith-based gatherings, which of course is what the letter focuses on.
Thank you, Council. Anything further? Council, I do want to thank you for agreeing with the letter, because when they announced phase 3, the draft plan, they asked for feedback. And that's why we prepared the letter, so that it could go forward as our feedback. And I appreciate where everyone comes from and the comments that were made, and agree with them also. And I think this is a good step for us to give our feedback back to our province. They need to know where we sit, what we're thinking, and that we want the province to be reopened. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to adjournment. Need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Penner, second by Councillor Penner. Call for the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Next regular council meeting is at Tuesday, July 7th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. Thank you.
3 weeks away. We're on holidays now.
There's such a little stuff in here, isn't it?
It is.